right, welcome from beautiful central Wisconsin and the Midwest. Kansas?
Kansas. Yeah. Hell, what do you mean Kansas? Hell yeah. I don't, yeah, nothing.
I mean,
Missouri.
You're not a Missouri guy at heart?
Zero.
Okay.
I can't get through it fast enough on the way to Nashville, which will be there next week for camp. But yeah, that's a very like sensitive subject. Around like the Overland Park area, they're like, where is that? Like Missouri? No. We're on the Kansas side.
Yeah, you're more in Big 12 country than SEC, huh?
Yeah, I know, right?
Big country.
Well, I mean, don't they consider Ohio the Midwest? I mean, hell, we don't even know what geographical locations are giving people these days. But yeah, it's also a absolutely spectacular day here. It's beautiful. It's May 6th. The year it's 2025. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 850.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to be almost close to mountain time over there, aren't you?
No.
Not even close?
We're a good ways from mountain, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. All I know is I'm not in it. I wish they didn't even have time zones.
You've never been west of Overland Park probably in your life.
I've been to Wichita for some hockey.
Okay.
And then to Denver. Well, I'll be heading to Denver. That's true mountain time for another travel hockey tournament for Hayden in June, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, legit mountain time. But yeah, the biggest do you remember? I don't think you did that race, but do you remember the race where there was a trail? We live in Chattanooga, and that's when you're straddling the time zones. I mean, you got people there that are probably living in one state and working in a different state and a different time zone, which is a whole nother conversation. But there was a trail race that I remember I did that was on Central Time in Tennessee, just outside of Chattanooga, but we were living, obviously, at that time, you and I were both on Eastern Time. But the race itself was on, and that was a whole different stress level. I was trying to figure out how we go. Because in Chattanooga, you take one step, all of a sudden you're in like Georgia. Next step, you're on Central Time in Tennessee, but you're just sitting there on the Eastern Time zone, basically. Because I loved living there in a lot of ways. Other ways I didn't, but I felt like it. Some days, the only downside of living that close to like a time zone change is I feel like some days it wouldn't get light outside till like 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's not as much of a problem for you as just for me, but that was a big problem for me. And there was days I was dropping off Hayden for school and it was freaking dark outside. And then problem for me, not a problem for you, is trying to go to bed at 8:30. The sun's freaking still out. Like it's like not even, it's like the sun doesn't go down to like 9:45. And that was not, I can't get behind that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
That was my circadian rhythm.
It was outstanding.
Yeah, well, you know what? We digress and move on from, we talk about the lawns, we talk about time zone change, we talk about all kinds. But today we're talking, you kind of scooped me on this one, bike fits. You went into, which is something that, you and I probably field a question about this at least once a week from one of our athletes. And we've talked a little bit about it before on the podcast. And I generally think most people, their niggles and issues they have on the run, I think it actually comes from their bike fit. And obviously you've seen, we've mentioned this just in a couple of weeks, just about changes you've seen that we've seen. And even just looking, I think I mentioned the post Texas was how different everyone looks on their bike. And what we thought, what we used to think was fast and comfortable and best is now kind of the opposite, but then just how different everyone looks. And it's just based on how comfortable you are, how flexible you are, maybe your age, your riding age, and then your bike. And so you said you kind of you surprised me a little bit. You said you went into Madtown this week and got a little bit of a bike fit, and it's a great topic because I think everyone either probably needs one or probably needs a new one if they had one before, because again, our body changes, your flexibility changes, maybe even the distance of what race you're trying to do changes. And I think it's a great topic. So let's just talk about and we haven't talked about it any before the show. So tell me how it went. What was your ultimate goal for when you went to go get it?
Yeah. The that bike I've had since Chattanooga. You walked in one day with that bike and I was like, okay, because I was on my old one. I'm always pretty comfortable with it, and I always say, I don't buy in totally to all the, little fancy gadgets on bikes and aero frame, like I think that stuff is important, but I've always felt like it's so much more to do with my fitness and how much harder I'm working. And, and then like what this guy said, he's a really good guy, man. His name is Dave Sampson, I believe. He's down at Trek. And, one of the things I liked about it and is it's nice. You get, you're with a guy who understands cycling really well for 2 hours, and you got him at your disposal. So I peppered him with a lot of questions and everything like that. And, one of the things was, I've never felt really comfortable. I mean, the bike came and it was way too probably aggressive, but I'm like, all right, well, I'll just figure it out, and I like the idea of being aggressive on a bike. So I kind of did with it. And then I made over time, I made some changes to it. I tried to figure out how to get, I was telling you before the cast, but the Trek models from back then are a little bit limited in what you can do up in the front. Now they have them where you can adjust the crap out of them and make them kind of like, I guess how Blumenfeld was riding. You can kind of tilt everything up and do all these things and make them longer and shorter and raise them and all these other things. But mine is kind of limited. So we were, sort of trying to make something work. And, but I never felt like I was always felt too aggressive on this bike. It was never, if I was in unbelievable shape and I was a lot younger, it's probably good. But for me as getting older, it was becoming an issue of just being able to withstand it for the whole race or long rides in general. So I just wanted to see if there was some things we could do. I didn't really particularly want to buy a new bike yet. And so I went in there and, he did the thing with the video and we talked a lot about, position and stuff. And he got me on there and, to my like pleasant surprise, he goes, I got to tell you, your seat's perfect. Well, height wise.
Natural.
And I, cause I've been toying around in my old bike feels good. So I was kind of doing all the measurements on that one and trying to align it exactly to what that was and everything. And he just said, your seat height is perfect. But when I hadn't ridden this bike since Madison Ironman last year. I'd been on the other one on the trainer and stuff. I got on it, man. I thought I was going to fall off the front. It was just like, I mean, that's how I felt. It was,
you kind of feel like you're falling over the front end of the bike, like onto the front wheel.
I'm like, Jesus, man, I don't know about this. So anyway, I'm hoping I was going to see if he could send me pictures of the progression that he made, which I thought was kind of interesting. But so one of the first things, he did was cause like, I tend to be aggressive. Like when I'm riding, even if my stuff is right, I tend to start scooting out on the front of the point. So what I did with my saddle is I pushed it all the way up. And he kind of noticed that and he said, that was one thing. So we slid that back just about, I think he said a centimeter or something like that. And got that where I was a little more, like instead of 10% of my body being behind the pedal center, now I was like more like 20. So that alone took some, falling off the front pressure away from me because I was just back a little bit, And then, so over the years I took, like last year I took my Aero bars were kind of slammed. I put in a little riser. Actually, it was in Chattanooga, so I had some rise on there compared to the beginning. But then I took the actual Aero pads, and last year I was with a bike mechanic, and we found like these little metal tubes that were maybe a half inch tall, and raised the actual Aero pad.
Okay, so you raised the stack height a little bit.
Yeah, so I got that going last year, but still, like the actual Aero bars were kind of tilted a little bit down, and I didn't know how to. I couldn't figure, because it's kind of like the engineering up there isn't the best, and even he admitted he figured out how to sort of take the Aero bars and angle them up just a little bit. So we got that, and then it did feel like I'm so instead of leaning downward on my elbows, I kind of was a little bit flatter somehow.
Yeah. With
the seat and everything, he got that going. But then, like he said, And I agree with you, you know, like I wasn't totally off, but then it was interesting when we started getting into the actual riding in that position, and he was starting to tell me some things like, you know, cause he said, now I want you to get down like you're really an Aero and kind of focus on your core and engage in your core and everything. And he showed me, and he got me really kind of in a really nice Aero position with that. But I noticed that while I was doing it, it was not easy, you know? And I think that's the thing. It's sort of, you can lay in aero bars or you can be riding in aero bars. And that was the one thing, or probably one of the major things I took away with it. And it's sort of like, I do think on some regard that I've always felt like I can ride myself into aero shape no matter what my front end looks like, or ride myself into that. So I think that's a possibility, but I do think that we tend to think of aero bars as something we just get out there and rest on, versus actually, you know, get in a good position with, and, you know, and still be engaged all through the core and, you know, your glutes and everything like that. So it's just, it was an interesting experiment because like he said, you know, he goes, a lot of times I don't really change a ton. I just talk to them about their pedal stroke a little bit and how they're getting into aero and how that, you know, that body comes over, and, you know, and obviously there's many other things you can do to be in better shape for that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the most interesting things about bike fits in general, and this is why I think you see a lot of people tinkering with it at home to like a negative degree, is that usually with the bike fit and with your bike, because everything because of the geometry and all the pressure points you have, obviously the main ones being like your aero pads, the pedals, and your saddle, like where you sit, right? You got elbows, you got a contact point there. It's a main contact point. Your where your cleats are positioned on your shoes, you know, and the pedals, that's a contact point, and obviously where you sit. Those are your three kind of main contact points. Your fourth, you know, up for debate would be kind of your hands and where they connect to the aero bars, but you're not really putting a lot of pressure on it. It's hard to find one adjustment that doesn't require an additional adjustment. You know, and so I think like even like working your way from the front end to the back, you know, trying to find it. I think you nailed it in terms of like, you know, I was just commenting this morning in Training Peaks, I was like, yeah, we got a lot of sore necks right now. And it's because a lot of people are outside on their trainer, or excuse me, off their trainer. They're outside for their first time on their bike in aero. And I completely agree. Like, you have to be able to hold a good aero position. And while being aero is obviously very beneficial, to me, and this is, I think, one of the things that you're seeing a lot right now with, you know, kind of some of the newer, obviously you got higher hands, higher stack, kind of hiding behind those. So again, hands higher than elbows, which used to be they wanted to be they want to be in line, or sometimes almost like you said, downhill. They thought that made you more slippery. And now some guys sitting up a little bit more, which I think allows them to generate more power. But the best bike fit, especially for someone doing 70.3s and long distance, is the most aero fit is the most comfortable fit. Because again, like we're talking, you know, an amazing bike fit, you know, one that's just reducing your CDA by a ton, like you're increasing aerodynamics, reducing drag. We're talking, you know, maybe 10 to 15, max 20 watts. I mean, that's a lot. That's significant. But if it's not comfortable over the course of an Ironman, you have to sit up for just a couple minutes.
Right.
You're in the negative. I mean, because you take that, right? And I remember watching a study from the difference in the, you know, when they first came out with like between like the aero bars bottom mounts, like the horizontal bottom mounts, the BTAs, and they did just a study on the straw hanging out. So you have like those old school like X-Lab torpedo horizontal BTA mounts, and then they have like the straw sticking straight up in the wind for 112 miles. And then they did that against a rider who just had a horizontal bottle, and then they would have to come out of aero to drink it over 112 miles. The straw was the least efficient. Even though you're not having to sit up, that little bit over 112 miles was significant. So think about having to spend 5 to 10 minutes of your entire body sitting up. Not just your entire body, but one of the very, very first podcasts we ever did, I think in the first like maybe 15 or 20, was we talked about there was a study done on your arm fatigue, and it's how it increases your rate of perceived exertion in your legs. So if you come out of the water and you got super trashed arms, and your air position, you're not very comfortable, and your arms are, it actually raises the RPE of you on the bike from the leg standpoint. And so yeah, being aero is a process, and you have to do things like, are you trying to shrug your shoulders forward? Are you trying to, keep your position still? I mean, to me, like if you're an aero and you're rocking left and right, you're losing watts, you're losing time, you're gaining drag. So just being like watching Sam Laidlow to me is incredible because the dude doesn't move. I watched him on the Kona bike course last year. He did 100. I didn't see his head move, anything move. Which again, like you hear age groupers talk about going the wind tunnel and doing these things. Like if you can't hold that position the entire time, it's not as fast. So to me, the best and most aero position is the one that you can hold for the entirety of the ride. Yeah, that's it. And I think people go way too aero and they try to do way too many fancy things with it. But comfort is this because, again, you know this just as well as anybody. If you don't like riding the bike because it's not comfortable, guess what? You're not going to ride it. So therefore, you're not going to be aero and comfortable, but you're also not going to be gaining bike fitness because you don't want to be on the bike that you have. And if you love riding the bike and it's super comfortable, you're going to ride it more. So you're going to gain fitness and be more aero and hold it longer when it comes time for game day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he rides. He's a big road guy, gravel guy. This guy, and I mean, he's like in one of these camps where I think a lot of people might actually benefit with a road bike out there, just because at Wisconsin, I'm talking about, because of this comfort thing, and like you're saying. And my thought was going in there is like, if I can, there's not a ton of just like lay down and be aero out on that course at Wisconsin, which is usually what I ride, and we'll do training rides out there and stuff. So I'm just thinking, like, if that's the case, can I get a little more comfortable so I can sit in aero more? But yeah, he was talking about how, and I think this is with that straw example you're talking about. He said one of the key points, what you want to do is when that wind is hitting like where your hands are out on the aero, what you want that to do is right there disperse and go around and kind of slip around the body. Like the problem becomes is when it gets under that and it gets all jangled up in your stomach and chest and everything like that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, it's he told me based on, he had kind of made the adjustment with the seat, and then I laid down kind of on what I had going there. And then we looked at that picture versus the one after he adjusted things up a little bit as much as he could, and then brought the bars themselves up. And we were looking at I forgot what exactly the angle was. I don't know, like was it 17% versus 25, or I don't know what it was. But it was kind of noticeable. It was sort of me just hanging out in aero versus me getting down in aero. And he said, right, if you can, hold that, like if that's a position, he goes, I'm just ballparking here, but that might be a half mile an hour right there, that difference. Yeah. And I just was like, wow, that's, and like you're saying, back to, just that and the holding the same power. I mean, that's like a, total race changer, it's like, so it's just really interesting. And I mean, you mentioned cleats. Now, I don't know. This is one thing he was talking about, but he said, like, most of the time you just want your cleats back all the way. That's his philosophy, is like, you don't want, because like if they're out, because I noticed that when my cleats they were pretty well where I think he wanted them. But when, there's room to move them forward and back, and if they're too far front, I mean, I'm always trying to push on the cleat. So if it's too far front, that means it's up around, my toes a little, or, I'm exaggerating, but the goal, I guess, is just to have the most powerful part of your foot hitting and pushing on that cleat, obviously. Exactly. So, and you're able to distribute the most amount of power through the meatiest, kind of densest part of your foot. That's why, like, if your cleat's too far forward, you see these people get a lot of hot spots. Right. That's the other thing you say, because your toes get involved. You're too much. Exactly. Right. The toes get numb. So like if you got your toes are getting numb, or you're getting hot spots in your feet, like look at your cleat position. Because again, like if you're, and a lot of times it also encourages people to like point their toes when they pedal, which obviously is also bad, right? You're not generating a lot of power. And so, yeah, you want them further back. And I also think, like, if you have to me, like one of the things I've always seen with athletes that have, because I know this from personal experience, like
God, like forever ago, when I first started getting into triathlons, so like 2 decades ago, I started to have Achilles issues when I ran. And it wasn't from running. It was from my cleat position on the bike. It was too far forward and it was too far to the right. So I was actually caving in a little bit when I was like mashing on the pedals, and I was putting all this pressure on my calf and my Achilles. It wouldn't show up on the bike because it's no impact, but then I'd go run and I'd have a couple twinges here and there. And so if you think about trying to increase your power, right, you're mashing the pedals, you're doing some big gear work, or you're just like really hammering it out. If your cleat position is way, way, way too high, then it's going to create problems. And that's one of those things where you've got to kind of, figure out and understand, like, hey, like if I'm having these issues, again, like I always tell people, go to the bike first. And whenever they have any kind of pain whatsoever, unless it's like something obvious, like their shoulder when they're swimming, if it's biking and running related, the first thing I always tell them is to go to the bike. Look at it, because you're on it, doing it more. And so you have this kind of like slow deterioration. So like, again, hot spots, numbness in the toes. But yeah, the further back that is, you're generating a lot of power, and you want that, in my opinion, like in the medius, densest part of your foot. If you're going to be jamming it out, you put it there. And it's the biggest platform, right? You're thinking about the platform of your pedal, whether it's a speed play, Shimano, Look, whatever you have. You want that, in my opinion, centered to where you've got the most amount of kind of like, not play, but the most amount of, foot on to the left and the right. And the further forward you get, sometimes that becomes a problem.
Yeah. And one of the other things, I think what you mentioned, the Achilles thing, and my issue is always, like on the run, has been the hamstring thing. And I was talking to him about this, and I think my tendency to, well, two things. When I did a lot of mountain biking, I was like, I just love grinding up those hills, but I got in this habit of really pulling up in the back. I was really trying to just grind that out. And I think when I pushed my seat up, I was, for lack of a better word, sort of falling over the front of the pedals a little more or something. And then, almost yanking up in the back. So I think I wasn't, because most people talk about, and this is one thing I've never had to deal with, is, on the run, is that they say their quads are just demolished. And my quads have never been demolished. And I just always wonder if I'm not actually pedaling correctly sometimes, with, or at least engaging my quads as much as I should on the bike. And I just found that interesting. So he was talking to me about, like, let's see, when you push down and you're at the bottom, and then when you're kind of starting the back of your pedal stroke, he was working on trying. He said it wasn't bad with me, but he was trying to get me to keep my heel down just a little bit longer through the back of that, to keep more of a flat foot through there, because I was releasing and pulling up, a little bit much. But so I was working on that. So like that's one of the things he was saying, is you kind of work in, and that's the other thing. He said his, like, what I found, just, I mean, we know this and we talk about it, but he said, man, a whopping amount of his training is basically just zone 2.
Yeah.
And like he was saying, is like, you can, if you have to dig it up, you can do it. But if you don't have the foundation of the chassis, as you call it a lot, you can't recover as well if you have to, like, explode up a hill or something like that, if you don't have that foundation built. So it really went back to that. And I just, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I think we all kind of know it, it's like you get to be a better rider by putting in a lot of miles and really building yourself up and building that endurance. The volume is so important.
Yeah. And you don't want to do the volume if you're not comfortable. And I mean, I think that's like, here's also like, like word to the wise, like, don't, regardless of, how well they come across or how knowledgeable they come across. Because again, someone can seem really, really smart and intelligent just because you lack a total understanding in the same department. But it doesn't mean they're the most qualified. Right. And so you want to think, like, if you got your bike at a bike shop because they had the bike in stock and you're like, oh yeah, you definitely fit this. Maybe make sure it fits you. Right. Because again, like when it comes in, and this is, I mean, I think a I know like the best bike process I ever went through was, so I used to work for a bike shop. This is again like early, God, like 2003, 2004. And so we got bikes like all the time. And, you know, you could get them at discount, you could get them at cost. And I remember saying, like, when you remember the old Acme Multisports in Nashville? Yeah. So like this is forever ago, right? So I remember I was like, you know what? I just done Muncie and I was on a Scott Plasma. And I mean, I was slammed. I mean, I was so aero. I was so slammed. I remember saying like, man, like that was sustainable. The reach was a little too long for me. Again, bikes are usually like put in categories based on their stack and their reach. And then obviously as all things, you know, usually go, like everyone measures their stack and reach from a different place, which also makes it more confusing. And then there's also not like a standard set, like extra small, medium, large, extra large across bike brands. Like some of them do sizes like Trek, small, medium, large. Some of them do it in centimeters, so like 52, 54, 56. And then they all measure from their place. So there's no uniform, you know, correct way to, you know, measure bike that everyone's kind of decided on. So which makes it also very challenging to get fit. But I remember thinking like, this is just not, like, this is too much. I'm in Arizona that year. This is 2004, I think, 2005. And I remember I showed up to Acme Multisports and I was talking to Alan, who was the owner, and I said, listen, man, and everyone has their, right, we're all somewhat specific and particular about the brands we like and then the color scheme. And I remember walking in, and this is probably the first and last I've ever done this. And this was 3 weeks out from my full distance race in Arizona. Everyone says, don't ever, you know, don't change bikes, don't change fits, whatever. And that's generally a good rule of thumb, unless you've got a really horrible fit and you're on a horrible bike, then it's a great idea. But I remember I walked in and I said, listen, I don't care what bike and what brand you put me on, and I don't even care what color it is. Just put me on the one that fits my geometry the best, that fits me the best, and I'll ride it. And he ended up fitting me on a Cervelo P3 that was white. If you know anything about me, I don't know anything white. And it fit me like a glove. And I went out to Arizona and I biked one of my best bike splits ever, and was the most comfortable I've ever been in my entire life. Just comfortable. And that's, of course, you want to be aero, but I was also super I never wanted to get up, never wanted to stretch my lower back. And yeah, sure, there's always room for like increasing your core, you know, your core strength, right? And that's not a course where, you know, you need the ability to be able to handle well. It's just 3 loops and you got to dodge, you know, other people and, you know, thorns in the road. But I was super comfortable. And so I think being comfortable is the biggest thing. And then obviously now, like, most of the brands make bikes that are so adjustable and they have so much like range of adjustments up on the front end. Just get the stack and the reach right. So the stack is how high the bike is. The reach is how long, which is obviously different for different. Some people have long torsos. Some people have short torsos. Some people have long legs. Some people have short legs. And that can kind of be a difference in, like, you know, where now they're trying to all kind of go the same way. So it makes picking a bike a little bit more, a little bit easier to do. But, you know, if you can find a fitter that will fit you, because a lot of bikes or a lot of shops have these, like, you know, these fit bikes where it's not a bike. They just get you on and they find your best position. They find your stack and your reach. So, like, you know, what your ideal stack and reach is. And then they'll put into a program. They'll tell you, like, what bike brands you should look for and what size you would be. That gives you the most adjustability. And if you're in between sizes, this is what you should go with. Here's a range of adjustability. You know, what distance are you doing? Are you doing sprint, Olympic? If that's the case, you can probably afford to try to be a little more aero. But then what does that look like for you? You know, if you can't, you know, shrug your shoulders in and be more aero, you know, that's a problem, you know. And then you want to have your hands a little bit more forward, a little bit higher. But if you can't move your elbows up enough to where your upper arms aren't, like, you know, constricting your capacity to breathe, like with your lungs, then that's also not going to, you know, help things out. You could go really slammed and save 10 to 15 watts being aero, or you could sit up a little more and be able to generate 15 to 20 and be more comfortable and probably run well off the bike. You know, that's my thing, is like, you can look one way on the bike, but if you can't run off it and your hip angle is so closed because you're so aero and your upper body is so horizontal, then it doesn't matter. Yeah, you're gonna, you know, like you said, bike for show, run for dough. And if your bike fit doesn't show your run fitness, then it's irrelevant. And you see that a ton with people's positions. Their hip angle is so closed, which I think is, again, one of the other benefits of seeing the kind of the high hands movement that's going on as people are sitting up a little bit more, but it's also allowing their hip angle to open up a little bit more, which helps them generate more power. But I also think allowing them to sit up more is, also, I think it's easier to consume fluids and calories sitting up. And then I also think it's easier to run off the bike when you've been sitting up for a bit versus being, like slammed to the ground Superman style, like you used to see a lot of the guys.
For sure, man. Yeah. And it's, one thought I had too, we were talking about, just that core strength and using cause like I've always felt like I underdo my core and I really need to work on it. And one of the ways that I recognize that is like how my hands and wrists get sore, just cause like riding a course like Wisconsin, you are out of Aero quite a bit and, there's a lot of bumps and stuff like that. But I think I'm using my arms too much to support me, just a little bit too much, And we were talking about that. I was in Aero, and he goes, "Well, one way we can kind of see how your core's doing is sit in Aero right now, and then without using your hands, sit up." I was like, "Okay, that didn't go too well." It was really kind of eye-opening, really, to think about that. And so I don't know. I guess it depends how low you are or whatever. But he said you probably should be able to do that. Maybe I can do that outside, but for whatever reason on the trainer, it was just not happening very easily. So that's one thing, but yeah, man, that's good stuff because, it's the comfort is really why I went, I was like, man, this is just not helping me race or even want to train. So, hopefully, I don't know, it felt good there and, have to get it out maybe today and ride it around a little bit, see how it feels again. But,
yeah, what was the not the straw that broke the camel's back, but like what got you, what kind of like, was the deciding factor that was like, all right, I need to get a fit on this bike?
Well, I guess I've been trying to get back on this bike here and I'm like, I knew I put it away after the race. That's like one of the things that happened is my Aero pad broke during Ironman again, and a couple times I've had problems with the Aero bars themselves. We talked about that, and sometimes they just come loose on this model, which sucks. But I think it was just like I got this bike, and I was thinking about, do I just keep riding the old bike? I'm like, I don't know if that's like, it's more comfortable. I think I was, and we were talking about because the bars on my old one kind of have, like on a road bike, they kind of curve up. So, where you're going to grab the brakes, they have a little bit of a curve up. And this old one had it. And I felt like it kind of was a little almost on the road bike feel where I could handle it a lot better too. But, so yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get the most out of this thing I can. Rather than just letting it, sit in the back like I have for the last 6 months or whatever. I want to see if I can get the most out. I wanted to just see if, it was something that we could make work and I could be more comfortable on it. And I'm going to see, cause I just, as the weather breaks, I guess I'm just wanting to ride a little bit more and just, see what we can get out of this bad boy.
Yeah. And it's so comfort, right? And then kind of like you said, like the
100%.
more you, and like going back to what he said and what we've, said for, forever now is like the importance of easy riding. Even the coffee shop ride that's just chill and relax, you're still getting, that it's that time. Like it's you're creating that foundation in a much easier way. And the more comfortable you are, the faster you're going to be. Mm-hmm. Yes, you could, because the more you're going to ride it, and then the more you're going to like it. And a person who loves their bike rides it a ton.
Right. It's that simple, dude.
The person who hates their fit and isn't comfortable doesn't want to ride, isn't going to be able to put out the power, is always going to have issues. And so if that's the camp that you're in, then go get a bike fit. I'm telling you, it's worth don't get a new wetsuit. Don't spend $800 on a wetsuit you're going to wear 3 times a year. And it's going to save you 2 or 3 minutes. Go get a great bike fit from a person who's got a great reputation, who is willing to take their time to look at you, ask questions, will allow you to come back afterwards, after you've actually ridden it for a while and make a couple tweaks. But I'm telling you, like it really, to me, it's the same thing as like, being stuck in a bad pair of shoes. If you have a pair of running shoes like you really, really love, you're always in them. I mean, I love running the fields and my feet hurt. I love running. If you're and you just can't, you always got a niggle, your feet hurt. You're like, I don't want to go do it because it's not comfortable. And so multiply that by 5 with not being comfortable on the bike. My shoulders hurt, my arms hurt, my neck hurts, my ass hurts. It's always something. And yeah, I agree. I think bike fitting is a little bit harder than being in the correct shoe. But if you are not like that dialed in, that you're so comfortable, like your legs and lungs should be the only thing that are sore after you ride or hurt. And that's only like 10% of the time. The rest, it should just feel awesome. You should want and love to get on your bike. And if you're not in that camp and you hate your bike, or or you feel like you made a bad choice, like try to find, again, most bikes, there's a way to make you more comfortable, because again, a comfortable rider is a fast rider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the last, I guess, 3 races at Wisconsin, the one was the rainy year, so I didn't really put too much stock in that one, but the next year is when I got the flat. That was the year I felt amazing. And, I thought back to, well, what was I doing? And that was when I kind of moved up here, and I was spending a lot of time at my mom's cottage, and I just put the trainer on the deck and I'd ride out there for like 4 hours on the trainer. It wasn't like super intense, crazy interval stuff. It was just kind of riding. And it was that sort of maybe build up the base kind of thing as much as possible kind of thing. And I will never know how that race would have really ended up, but I felt really amazing through 40 miles. And last year it wasn't the same feeling at all, and I had done a lot of, just riding around here outside, kind of flat riding. I would, do a lot of sort of sprint work and stuff like that. And I just probably didn't put in the, you know what I mean? Like just that, there's something about like a trainer ride for 4 hours. If it's, like a boring kind of just spinning, not just spinning, but spinning with a little bit of a purpose.
Right.
We talked about that before. It's that sort of, what is zone 2? Everybody's like, well, zone 2 is just getting on and spinning. You got to kind of stretch zone 2 a little. It's got to have, an active component to it. It's that teaching your legs to just keep going in that little bit of firmness.
Yeah, I mean, I generally, like, if you can keep it pretty simple, honestly, like, especially when you're out riding, if you don't want to look at your watch or your watts, your bike computer, like, to me, there's like those 3 pretty distinguishable feels when you're riding your bike. And to me, like the first one is pedaling. Pedaling is zone 1. Like if you're and pedaling is just moving the cranks around with your pedals. That to me, that's zone 1. Pressure on the pedals is zone 2. To where you're actively having pressure on the pedals the whole time. You're not coasting on purpose, on every downhill. You always have pressure on the pedals. Always. And obviously you can adjust how much pressure, and then the other zone would be just purpose with the pedals. If you're pedaling with purpose, then obviously you have a zone in mind kind of above zone 2, so like zone 3, 4, and 5. Like that's a purpose. But it really is that simple when you go out and ride. If you want to disengage, like again, soft pedaling or just pedaling to me is that zone 1, where you're coasting. It's okay to coast. You're just time on your ass in the saddle and just putting in some extra minutes. But zone 2, like that pressure, you should always have pressure going up, pressure on the flats, and then pressure going down, right? You're not just, you're not taking the free, the free speed. You're always having pressure on it. And then obviously if you want to ride with purpose, then it's got a purpose above that. And that's, and you can feel that difference in what you do. But yeah, I mean, there's not to say zone 1 is junk miles, but a lot of times it can be because it's just too much coasting, right? It's like those guys we always used to see out on the trace, and every time they'd be out there for 5 hours and they probably had a ride time of like 2, right? And they're like, yeah, we were on the trace for like 5 hours today, and they were stopping like every picnic table and every restroom stop imaginable,
right?
And there's a huge difference in time accumulated, with constant pressure versus just like that soft pedaling. But again, like if you love being on your bike and you're comfortable being on it, you're going to be on it more. So some of those zone 1s and those kind of where you're just kind of dicking around a little bit, those are fine, right? You're still getting, a little recovery and you're being on your bike. But yeah, I mean, like the people that are most comfortable are usually the fastest. They love being on their bike and they're super comfortable. It's just it's there is no thought right there about discomfort or you know it's just it's all in the you're also faster because you're on your bike more, and if you're on your bike more, you're a better handler. If you're a better handler, guess what? You're a better biker, you're a better cyclist, you're a faster cyclist because you don't have to, set up, 40 feet before the turn, and then you know how to take a corner and you know how to descend. I mean, what did Starkey tell us like a long time ago on the Wisconsin course? Like you're looking at 5 minutes just from being able to navigate coming in and out of the turns correctly.
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah, and you can't do that without being comfortable on the bike.
Yeah, and I like how you describe that pressure on the pedals, because that's one of those things that I like to actually do. Like a lot of times I'm on the trainer, I'll find that pedaling zone 1 thing, where you're just pedaling, but I'll just sort of keep it in that gear and then find zone 2, and then toy around with the same gear, just to understand the efforts and, just increase cadence and stuff like that. That's really kind of how I like to play around that, because we talk about feel a lot and power and that sort of thing. But as far as feel goes, I just like to feel that pressure on the pedals. And I know that when you can kind of get in this zone where that you feel almost this balance with your feet. I like to talk about, like, I feel like when I'm riding my best, it almost feels like I'm on a Stairmaster, because you just sort of have this like pressure going on, but you're like super balanced, and it's just kind of this up and down. You're not overthinking your stroke. That's another thing he told me yesterday, because you've ridden enough where you just kind of want to pedal, man, and just flow. And I talk to people about that all the time. It's like riding a bike. You got to ride a bike, man. You can't be like overthinking it. Obviously swimmers do that like crazy. And I'm sure you feel the same thing in the water. You just got to swim, after you've done, so much, you just want the best. You're going to be your best when you can kind of just let it go and ride. But there's that, feeling you got to have that. It's like feel for the pedal, almost feel for the water, feel for the pedal. And I think it's real interesting.
And pressure on the pedal makes you better at handling and cornering. Anyone will tell you, like, you don't want to coast when you're trying to steer your bike. You want to have pressure on the pedals. You want those, because those contact points increase your ability to be stable.
Yeah, that's really good with balance and stability.
It's like, exactly, right? It's like, you have to, like, that pressure on the pedals are those two crucial contact points. And if they're loose and they're, or they're not being used, like, you lose the ability to create, extra stability on the bike, which is, again, like a problem people have already because they don't ride their bikes enough outside, and that's just, again, like, a huge, and like I said, even if it's not on your tri bike, like take your road bike out and then do, go out for a, 4-day week and just ride a shit ton. You'll still be a better cyclist and you'll still be better off when you get on your tri bike.
For sure.
It's just, it allows you, I think people underuse their road bike a lot too, because it's not their quote unquote race bike, but people are also generally more aggressive on their road bike because it is easier to handle. And if you're more aggressive and you practice on doing things that are a little more, advanced, then you're going to carry that over to when you get on your actual tri bike. But most people are just so obsessed with being like on their tri bike 24/7, whether it's because the way it looks or it's their race bike or it's their only bike, like you're not as likely to want to ride with the group, which also increases your ability to ride a bike fast. It pushes you harder. You can ride closer to a group. It works on your core, all these things, and then you're on a road bike. You're probably taking corners a little bit sharper. You're probably descending a lot faster. And all that does is create confidence, right? Same with like a mountain bike, right? Totally different experience that is good for you in so many different ways. Like, I know, not everyone can have, a ton of bikes, but even just one extra one that allows you to kind of go out and not think about being a triathlete, but more so think about being a cyclist, that's gravel, mountain, road, whatever it is. Like, it translates over, not just from the added volume, but from the confidence in your ability to handle the bike that you are going to race on. And the more you stay away from doing that, the worse rider you become, and the further off you're going to be from your best performance of showing your fitness, especially on technical courses, which again we see like with riders in general, especially in triathlon, are becoming less and less skilled at handling. And you got crowded courses of more participants, and you see people just losing and bleeding time, and then they just complain about people, like swerving all over the place. And I mean, I even listened to Taylor Knibb's post-race interview. She was like, it was a little sketchy, and I was kind of scared at times because at Texas, she had said that. She was like, I love having all these people because she's so nice. She's like, it's so great having all these people out there, but it was a little scary on the last loop because she's flying by. And you got, age groupers at 2 or 3 abreast. You were just swerve left for no apparent reason, or they don't know how to reach their bottle and not swerve to the left or swerve to the right. It's like but to be the one who's the most confident, you're going to gain time, and it's going to be less stressful. And again, those are all just things that we could do on our own that don't have to do with, a change in training stimulus, or it's just being on your bike more and then changing up the bikes and the stimulus and being able to have fun with it and wanting. And again, like you said, like wanting to do it is the biggest game changer when you get a great fit.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, I love that about different bikes and stuff. I'm big on that. Actually, I have a fat tire and an e-bike and a mountain bike, fat tire e-bike I know everybody thinks that's, I thought it was crazy at first, and I got it, and I'm like, I want to burn a trail in around here. So I knew I couldn't really, I knew I wouldn't be able to suck it up on just a straight up, mountain bike or something. It would just be so hard. But this thing, so I use it a lot on actually like sort of these recovery rides. I feel the pressure, like you're saying, but it's not the intense. It's like you're spinning the legs, but I'm also riding around on dirt trails and avoiding trees and shit. So I'm all about it, man. Just do whatever feels good and get out and ride and get to be you can never lose by being a better bike handler. I like
that. You can never lose by being a better bike handler.
Yeah, I see a bunch of people. I'm like, yeah, drafting. No.
So true. All right. Well, go out there, get yourself a fit, get it back on the bike, and enjoy yourself. Hit the road. And as always, we appreciate you guys. We love you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. We got a lot of camps for the rest of the year. We got our Wisconsin camp coming up there at the end of July. We've got the Nashville camp, which is sold out. That's next week. Always good stories coming from that. And click on the coaching tab and peruse through all the coaches that we have to offer, different personalities, same great C26 philosophy, and schedule a setup call. If you don't know which one is right for you, ask us and we'll help pair you with one of those. As always, Mike's available, Mike at c26triathlon.com, or if you need anything from me specifically, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, dude. I'll catch you later, man.
Check it Thursday.
See you.